The rocking chair creaked under my weight as I watched the neighbors across the porch. Mrs. Harper was hanging laundry in the backyard, her husband fiddling with the lawnmower, a typical Kannapolis Saturday idyll. I lit a cigarette despite Sandra's disgruntled glances through the kitchen window. She always wrinkled her nose when I smoked on her precious veranda with its white railing and hanging pots of petunias. 3 months had passed since I'd sold the house in Detroit and moved in with Liam. After Dolores's funeral, it had been unbearably empty. Every corner reminded me of her, her knitting on the couch, her favorite mug on the kitchen table, the smell of her perfume in the bedroom. 43 years we lived in that house. We bought it young, when Liam was a baby. The neighborhood was considered decent then, working families raising kids, mowing lawns, washing cars on weekends. Liam insisted on moving, said I needed a family close by. Noble intentions, but family smelled faintly of family. His house was in a new neighborhood in Kannapolis, where all the houses looked like twins. Gray siding, white garage doors, neat front gardens. The American dream in a standard package. Detroit house went for $200,000. Not bad for a neighborhood that's been going downhill for a long time. Realtor was surprised at the price, said I was lucky to find a buyer. A young couple with 2 kids, they wanted something inexpensive but spacious. They did not care that the neighboring houses are abandoned and on the corner sell drugs. The main thing was they could afford the mortgage. The money is in my personal bank account, and I'm in no hurry to tell my son about it. He thinks the old man is a beggar and an addict. Let him think that. Sometimes it's good to be underestimated. People get careless, say the wrong things, take liberties. You listen, you remember, you draw conclusions. Liam appeared in the doorway, nervously adjusting his shirt, blue pinstriped. New, still smelling like the store. He always did that when he was nervous, tugging at the collar, smoothing out non-existent creases. When he was a boy, he had done the same thing when he was preparing for school exams, standing in front of the mirror in the hallway and tidying himself up. Dolores laughed at his habit, but I found it touching. "Dad, Sandra's parents are coming over tonight," he began, avoiding a direct look, "and her sister and her husband." "I know," I replied, shaking the ashes out of the coffee can. "I've heard your Sandra ranting about it all week." Liam grimaced. He didn't like it when I called his wife your Sandra, but I didn't care about his feelings. Sandra really was a stranger, an arrogant person with pretensions to aristocracy, even though her father only owned a small machine shop on the outskirts of town. And her mother worked in a bank as a middle manager. But in Kannapolis, that was considered almost elite. It's a small town, only 30,000 people. Everybody knows everybody, everybody's heard of each other. The local hierarchy is clear. At the top are doctors, lawyers, business owners, bankers. In the middle are managers, teachers, police officers. At the bottom, laborers, salesmen, drivers. And even lower down, the unemployed and the retired. I had a place of honor at the bottom of the pyramid. "Listen," Liam sat down in a nearby chair, nervously intertwining his fingers. "They're very, how should I put it, conservative people. Robert and Carol place a lot of importance on propriety." I grinned. Decency. I wondered if Robert knew that his precious daughter had been having an affair with Chad Morris for 2 years. Local realtor, by the way, married with 2 teenage kids, lives in a big house on Maple Street. Wife teaches elementary school. Model family, judging by the photos on social media. But Chad is clearly bored with his marriage if he's willing to risk his reputation for a fling with Sandra. That's something Liam doesn't realize. Blind as a mole when it comes to his wife. Typical story. A man so consumed with work and his own problems that he doesn't notice the obvious. Or maybe he just doesn't want to notice. It's easier to think everything's fine than to admit the truth. "What do you want to tell me, son?" I asked, taking a drag on my cigarette. "Maybe we should, you know, keep yourself in line?" He blushed, realizing how that sounded. "It's not that you're badly behaved, it's just that they're not used to people like me?" I finished for him. Liam swallowed. Right, he's embarrassed of his old dad. My calloused hands, my rough speech, my habit of calling things by their proper names. I spent my life working in Detroit factories, fixing machines, coming home in greasy clothes. Dolores would meet me on the doorstep, help me pull off my boots, send me to the shower. She never complained about the dirt, about the smell of machine oil. about my appearance. She accepted me as I was. The local elite, on the other hand, think I'm an inappropriate element. Last week, I went to the grocery store where Carol's niece works. The girl barely nodded at me, even though she'd always said hello before. I guess she's been told not to be too friendly with her loser grandpa. Dad, that's not the point. That's exactly the point, I interrupted him. You're afraid your old man will embarrass you in front of your father-in-law and his family. Liam lowered his head. He knew I was right, but it was beyond him to admit it. He's a good boy. He doesn't want to hurt his father, but he doesn't want to lose his reputation either. He's caught between two fires, and he's like a hunted animal. Sandra came out onto the veranda holding a tray of lemonade. She was wearing a knee-length beige dress, her hair neatly arranged in a low bun, a model housewife from a laundry detergent commercial, a thin gold chain around her neck, a Michael Kors watch on her arm. It's not the most expensive, but in Kannapolis, it's a sign of wealth. Too bad that exemplarity was fake to the core. I've seen her texting Chad while Liam's showering, running out to the mailbox when her husband left for work, fixing her makeup in front of the hallway mirror on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Those are the days she supposedly has a yoga class at the sports center. Keith, why don't you have some lemonade? She suggested with a strained smile. Some. Thanks, I'm fine, I replied without turning my head. She placed the tray on the table between the chairs and sat down next to her husband. They looked like the perfect couple, he in his iron shirt and dark pants, she in her beige dress. A picture for an advertisement for a happy family. Only I knew what was behind that picture. Lying, pretending, cheating. But they kept playing their parts because it was convenient. Keith, tonight is a really important night, Sandra said in that tone you use with naughty children. My parents are very excited to get to know you better. She's lying without blinking an eye. Her parents can't stand me. That was clear from the first time they met me 3 months ago. Robert looked at me like I was talking furniture, nodding politely but without warmth. And Carol cringed as if I exuded a foul odor. All evening they discussed local affairs, people they knew, pretending I wasn't in the room at all. But Sandra continued to play her role as the caring daughter-in-law. She poured me coffee, asked me how I was feeling, told me about my plans for the weekend. All the right things, all the etiquette. And then when my parents left, she became cold and distant. The mask fell away, her real face showed through. What do you want me to do? I asked, putting out my cigarette. Just be yourself, she smiled even wider. Just maybe no stories about the factory, and without political discussions? No stories about the factory where I worked for 30 years. No stories about fixing machines on 3 shifts, getting hurt, fighting the union for workers' rights. No political discussions that might hurt the feelings of local Republicans. In short, sit tight and keep your head down. Statue for the interior. Liam nervously adjusted his collar. Again, the gesture betrayed his excitement better than any words could. He was really afraid I'd ruin his reputation. Son grew up, went to college, and became a manager at a local logistics company. Decent position, decent salary, decent friends. He even bought himself a Hugo Boss suit for special occasions. And then the locksmith dad shows up in jeans and a plaid shirt and disrupts all the harmony. Okay, I said, rising from my chair. I'll be a goody-goody. Sandra sighed in relief, and Liam even smiled. They thought they'd convinced me that the old man had given up and agreed to play by their rules. Naive. I really will behave myself tonight, but not because they asked me to. I have my own plans for this dinner, and scandalizing beforehand was not my intention. I entered the house and went up to my room on the 2nd floor. It was small and cramped, more like a closet. It used to be Liam's office, but he'd cleared it out for me. A bed, a dresser, a desk by the window. The view was of the backyard, a small lawn, a bed of roses, an old oak tree by the fence. On the desk was a clipboard, a gift from Liam last Christmas. He'd thought the old man would have mastered modern technology for entertainment, games, kiddie videos, social media. I was using the tablet for something more serious. My friend Randy from Detroit was already 74, but he was better with computers than many younger people. He was a former computer programmer at the same plant where I worked as a mechanic, retired from hacking. He said it kept his brain sharp and helped him not to go crazy from boredom. Thanks to him, I learned a lot about my son's family. Randy taught me how to crack passwords, track messages, find deleted files. Turns out people are very careless on the internet. They think no one can see them and they relax. And then they're surprised when their secrets come out. The sound of voices came from downstairs. Liam and Sandra were discussing the menu for the evening, the furniture arrangement, the latest preparations. They were as excited as actors before an opening night, and they didn't realize that the performance would not be at all what they had planned. Saturday began with the clatter of pans in the kitchen. Sandra had gotten up at 7:30 in the morning and immediately set about making preparations. The sounds of her activity echoed throughout the house. The clatter of the cutting board, the sizzle of the frying pan, the slamming of the oven door. I lay in bed and listened to the commotion. I wondered if she was preparing for her meetings with Chad Morris with the same vigor. By 8 in the morning, the odors from the kitchen became so intense that I gave up and went downstairs. Sandra was standing at the stove in her pink bathrobe, her hair in a careless bun, a focused expression on her face. I had a picture of the perfect housewife, working selflessly for her family's happiness. "Good morning, Kit," she said over her shoulder without turning around. "Coffee in the pot. Help yourself." I poured the coffee into a mug and sat down at the kitchen table. From here, I had a perfect view of all her activities. Food was piled on the countertop, meat for roasting, vegetables for salad, ingredients for dessert. Sandra darted between the stove and the refrigerator like a man possessed, checking the list in her notebook every 5 minutes. "Is there a big party coming up?" I asked, sipping my coffee. "Family dinner," she answered briefly, whisking something in a bowl. "I want everything to be perfect. Perfect." It was a word she'd been repeating constantly the last few days. Perfect service, perfect menu, perfect atmosphere, as if the fate of the universe depended on that one meal. Or maybe it did. At least the fate of her marriage did. Liam came down around 9, already dressed and combed. Saturday, but he looked like he was going to a business meeting. Dark blue slacks, white shirt, even had his tie on. Sandra gave him an approving smile and pecked him on the cheek. "How did you sleep, darling?" she asked, pouring him an orange juice. "Fine." He sat down across from me and nodded in greeting. "Dad, how are you doing?" "Business as usual," I said. "But your wife's business is booming. She's been cooking for 3 hours." Sandra gave me a sharp look. She didn't like it when I called her your wife, but I didn't care about her feelings. She really was a stranger in this house, despite her best efforts to look like a hostess. "Sandra's very responsible about these things," Liam said, defending his wife. "She wants to make a good impression." "Who?" I asked innocently. "Her parents, who saw her in diapers?" "Keith." Sandra turned around from the stove, holding a wooden spoon like a weapon. "My parents haven't seen us together, as a family, in a long time. It's important to us. For her, rather." Liam looked like he'd rather spend Saturday in front of the TV with a can of beer. But his wife had decided otherwise, which meant he'd smile at the guests and pretend he was happy to see them. The next few hours passed in uninterrupted preparation. Sandra ran around the house with a rag and a vacuum cleaner, scrubbing the already clean surfaces. Liam was busy setting the table, arranging plates and glasses with mathematical precision. I watched them from my chair in the living room, occasionally commenting on what was going on. "Keith, maybe you could help," Sandra suggested, wiping down the coffee table for the third time. "I'm already helping," I replied. "I'm not interrupting your work." She pressed her lips together but didn't say anything. Liam gave me a reproachful look. "You can't do that, Dad. You should be helping your daughter-in-law." But I wasn't going to be a part of the drama. Let her get ready to meet her relatives on her own. By 2 p.m., the house had been transformed beyond recognition. Every surface glistened, fresh flowers stood in vases, and the air was filled with the aromas of food being prepared. Sandra had changed into the same beige dress, put on lipstick, and assumed the pose of a welcoming hostess. Liam checked his appearance in the hallway mirror and adjusted his tie. "What time are they arriving?" I asked, lighting another cigarette. 5 o'clock, Sandra answered, wincing at the smoke. "Keith, maybe you shouldn't smoke in the house." "Where am I supposed to smoke? It's raining outside." Indeed, in the afternoon, the sky clouded over and a fine fall rain began to drizzle. The drops rattled on the windows, creating a cozy atmosphere of home warmth. But it didn't feel cozy in this house. There was too much tension, too much unspoken. "You can smoke on the veranda," Sandra insisted. There's a roof. I shrugged and went out onto the veranda. The rain really didn't reach under the awning, but it was cool and damp. I settled into the rocking chair and lit a cigarette, looking out at the empty street. The neighbors had gone home, and only the occasional car passed by, tires rustling on the wet pavement. Around 4, Liam came out to me with a cup of coffee in his hands. He sat in a nearby chair and stared at the rain in silence for a few minutes. Then he sighed and turned to me. Dad, I know this isn't easy for you, he began gently. New place, new people. But today is a really important day for Sandra and me. What makes it so important? I asked, shaking off the ashes. Her parents want to get to know our family better, including you. You know how they are. Conservative, attach importance to tradition, family values. I chuckled. Family values. Does Liam know that his wife meets Chad every Tuesday at the motel on Highway 12? Or that they plan to spend the weekend in the mountains while he's at a conference in Charlotte? That's where family values come in. And what do they want to see in me? I asked. Just be a father. A good man who raised his son. They'll appreciate that. Liam sounded sincere. He really wanted this to go smoothly. But there was anxiety in his voice. He was afraid I'd say the wrong thing, hurt someone's feelings, ruin the experience. My son grew up cautious, diplomatic, unlike his father. Okay, I said. I'll try not to make a mess of it. He smiled with relief and patted me on the shoulder. Naive boy. Thought he'd convinced his old father to play by the rules of decent society. Didn't realize I had my own plans for the evening. At 5:30, a dark blue car pulled up in the yard. Robert and Carol arrived exactly on time. I watched from the window as they got out of the car, adjusted their clothes, walked to the front door. Robert in a gray suit, Carol in a dark green dress. A respectable couple, radiating respectability. Sandra rushed out to greet her parents. Liam following. There were exclamations, kisses, exchanges of pleasantries. I stayed on the veranda, finishing my cigarette. Let them say hello without me first. Exchange news, relax. 10 minutes later, Liam showed up with a guilty look on his face. Dad, please come in. Everyone's already here. I put out my cigarette and went into the house. Robert and Carol were sitting in the living room, holding wine glasses. They looked exactly the same as they had 3 months ago. Prim, inaccessible, with a slight contempt in their eyes. Sandra fussed nearby, offering hors d'oeuvres. Keith, how are you? Robert said hello without getting up from the couch. I'm fine, I said, sitting down in the chair across from him. How are you doing in Kannapolis? Carol asked with a strained smile. Quiet, quiet. The conversation was not going well. They asked polite questions and I gave one-word answers. Liam was nervously adjusting his tie. Sandra kept jumping up to fetch or fix something. The atmosphere was tense, artificial. At 6:30, the second car arrived. Jessica and her husband, Tom. Sandra's sister turned out to be the complete opposite. Bright, boisterous, with dyed red hair. Tom, a tall, thin man, worked as an insurance agent and had a habit of smiling all the time. Keith, Jessica exclaimed, extending her hand to me. At last we're getting to know each other. She was the only one of the group who acted naturally. She didn't shy away from laughing, asking direct questions, telling funny stories. Robert and Carol pressed their lips together when she spoke too loudly. They didn't like their youngest daughter's demeanor. At dinner, the conversation became more animated. Jessica entertained everyone with stories about her job. She was a manager at a travel agency. Tom kept the conversation going with stories about clients and funny cases from practice. Even Robert relaxed a bit and shared news from the auto shop. I was silent most of the time, occasionally answering questions. I watched Sandra, who played the role of the perfect hostess. She smiled, poured the wine, made sure everyone's plates were full, but I could see how often she glanced at the phone next to her plate, waiting for a text from Chad. What do you think about local politics? Robert asked, turning to me. I don't follow much, I answered. What do you mean you don't follow? He was surprised. Hey, Juan, every citizen should be aware of what's going on. Robert, don't, Carol said warningly. But he was getting into the swing of things. He started talking about the local elections, the candidates, the importance of supporting the right people. Liam nodded, agreeing with his father-in-law. Sandra tried to change the subject, but Robert wouldn't let up. You see, kid, he said, waving his fork, we need to think about our children's future. What kind of world they're going to live in? What kind of world do they live in now? I asked. Robert fell silent, not expecting the question. Carol smiled strainedly. Jessica looked at me with interest. Liam swallowed nervously. In a good world, Robert finally answered, we've created a good community here, one that values family, tradition, decency. Decency. Another beautiful word. I wonder how much decency is considered decent when a wife cheats with a local realtor. But Robert doesn't know that. Not yet. Dinner went on for another hour. Sandra served dessert, homemade apple pie with ice cream. Everyone praised her cooking skills. Carol even asked for the recipe. Liam was proud of his wife, his face glowing with pleasure. He thought the evening was going perfectly. And I sat and waited, waiting for the right moment to show this family what the real truth was. Soon everyone would know what she really was, their model Sandra. After dessert, Liam suggested that everyone move to the living room for coffee. Robert settled into a large armchair with the look of a life expert. Carol sat next to her daughter on the couch. Jessica and Tom sat across the room as they continued to discuss vacation plans. The atmosphere was complacent. Everyone relaxed after a good dinner. I sat in the corner watching this scene of family well-being. Sandra was pouring coffee from the beautiful set she had received as a wedding present. The porcelain tinkled melodiously as she placed the cups on the saucers. Liam helped his wife by serving cream and sugar. The perfect couple in the perfect house. Keith, tell us about Detroit, Jessica asked. Nafran, I've never been there, but I've heard stories. What exactly do you want to hear? I asked, taking the cup of coffee from Sandra's hands. Well, what it's like to live there. Is it true that the town is completely dead? Robert wrinkled his nose. Apparently, he didn't approve of such straightforward questions. But I didn't care about his approval. I began to tell the truth about Detroit, the closed factories, the empty houses, the neighborhoods you shouldn't go into after dark, about how the city once called the capital of the auto industry had become a symbol of American decay. Liam was nervous. He was afraid my story was too grim, that I was showing our family in an unfavorable light. Like, look what a dump my father came from. But Jessica listened with keen interest, asking more questions. Even Tom put aside his eternal smile and listened attentively. Don't you regret moving? Carol asked. There was nothing else to do there, I answered. After my wife died, the house was too big and empty. There was an awkward pause. No one knew what to say. Death is an uncomfortable topic for small talk. Sandra hurriedly offered more coffee. Liam started talking about the weather. The conversation drifted smoothly into a safer direction, but I could see Robert and Carol glancing over at me. They clearly didn't think I was good company for their family. An old widower from a depressed town, no education, no prospects, a burden to their son-in-law, an unwanted element in their happy world. It was 9:15 when I got up from my chair. I'm going out on the veranda for a smoke, I announced. Maybe you shouldn't, Liam said quietly. It's still raining. It's okay, it won't melt. I went out on the veranda and lit a cigarette. It was still raining, the drops drumming on the roof of the awning. The air was fresh and cool, with the smell of wet earth and withering leaves. Through the living room window, I could see the company continuing their conversation without me. Robert was saying something, gesturing with his hands. The others listened and nodded. About 10 minutes later, Liam came out behind me. His face was anxious, his lips tightly pressed together. He walked over to the railing and stared at the rain in silence for a few seconds. Then he turned to me. Dad, Robert asked if you could find something to do, he began cautiously. Maybe a retirement club or something. Oh, I said, so the old man's in the way. That's not the point, Liam snapped. It's just that they think it would be good for you to find new friends, interests. Ew, so you don't have to stay at home and spoil your impression of your family. Liam blushed. Gotcha. So the conversation behind my back had already taken place. The father-in-law had expressed his opinion that my presence in the house was undesirable, and the son hadn't defended his father. Look, Liam tried to take my hand, but I pulled away. I realize this doesn't sound good, But they're right about you needing to socialize more with people your own age. Shabar, people my age, I repeated. You mean old people. Not old people. People with similar interests, experiences. He rambled on, realizing that the excuses sounded pathetic. And I looked at my son and saw how he had changed over the years. Once he would have defended his father from any attack. Now he put his father-in-law's opinion above his father's feelings. You know what, I said, putting out my cigarette. Maybe it would be better for them if I disappeared for the evening, so as not to interfere with decent people socializing. Dad, you don't have to do that. What's the right way? I stood up and looked him in the eye. You want me to sit quietly, keep my head down, don't spoil the picture of the perfect family? Don't you? Liam didn't say anything. Couldn't argue because I was telling the truth. He was ashamed of his father in front of his wife's relatives. Ashamed of my appearance, my speech, my past. He wanted me to be different, educated, cultured, suited to his new status. All right, I said calmly. Well, if that's the case, I'll leave and won't bother you. Dad, don't go, Liam said worriedly. They'll think something wrong. What will they think? That we kicked you out or something? It'll look weird. Uh-huh. He wasn't worried about how I felt. He was worried about how it would look from the outside. The son kicked the father out of the house during family dinner. Not good for the reputation. I headed for the door, but Liam blocked my path. Stop, he said firmly. You're not going anywhere. Why not? I wondered. Because, he hesitated, searching for words. Because I can't let you go. It's raining. It's dark. You might catch a cold or something. Caring son. But the concern was ostentatious, for his own peace of mind. He was afraid that if something happened to me, he'd have to answer to Sandra and her relatives. Then what do you suggest? I asked. Liam looked back at the house where the warm light of the living room shone outside the windows. The company was still talking peacefully, unaware of our altercation on the veranda. Then he looked at the garage, which stood in the far corner of the yard. Sit in the garage, he said at last. It's dry, warm, and there's an old chair. You can read magazines or something. In the garage. I couldn't believe my ears. Yeah, Liam avoided my gaze. Just for a couple hours until they leave. Then you'll go back to the house, and everything will be back to normal. So it's come to this. The son suggests the father sit in the garage so he doesn't embarrass the family in front of the guests, like a dog that's being hidden from a visit from the health inspector. And you think that's okay? I asked. Dad, come on. He tried to take my hand. It's temporary, just for a couple hours. And tomorrow we'll discuss everything calmly. I looked at my son carefully. He stood before me as a grown man, but at that moment he looked like a frightened child. He was afraid of scandal, afraid of being judged, afraid of upsetting the delicate balance of his well-being, and he was ready to sacrifice his own father's well-being. Okay, I said, suddenly calm. Liam was surprised at my submission. Really? Really? I'll go to the garage and sit quietly. The relief on his face turned to gratitude. Thanks, Dad. I knew you'd understand. He walked me to the garage, opened the door, turned on the light. It was actually pretty cozy inside. Liam's car stood in the center, tools hung along the walls, and an old chair with worn upholstery stood in the corner. There were magazines and a few paperbacks on a shelf. See? Liam said, looking around the room. It's not bad in here. You can read, think about your own things. Go join the guests, I interrupted him. They'll notice you've been gone so long. Yes, of course. He headed for the door, then turned around. Dad, you're not going to, make any noise or anything. What do you mean? Just sit here quietly, he said firmly, and don't try to ruin the evening. With those words, he walked out of the garage and closed the door. I heard the key turn in the lock, so he decided to be safe. Locked my father in the garage like a delinquent child who'd been sent to the corner. I sat down in the chair and looked around. It was quiet, just the rain pounding on the garage roof. From the window in the ceiling, I could see the lighted windows of the house, where the family dinner continues without me. Liam has probably already returned to his guests and attributes my absence to a slight malaise or fatigue. I pull my cell phone out of my pocket and check the time. 20 minutes past 9. I have at least an hour, maybe an hour and a half until the company disperses. Quite enough for what I had in mind. I rose from my chair and walked over to the workbench against the far wall. Liam kept tools, car parts, odds and ends here. Behind a can of bolts, I fumbled for the familiar rectangle of a tablet. I'd stashed it there a week ago, knowing my son rarely looked in this part of the garage. I turned the tablet on and waited for it to load. Randy had taught me the ins and outs of the device. The old programmer turned out to be a great teacher, patiently explaining every step. He said that nowadays you can't get anywhere without computer literacy. He was right. I opened the folder Randy and I had created 2 months ago. It was simply called Sandra and contained everything we could gather about her secret life. Photos taken outside a motel on Route 12, screenshots of correspondence with Chad Morris, bank statements that showed her spending money on gifts for her lover. Randy was a real master of his craft. He hacked into Sandra's cloud storage, accessed her social media, even managed to intercept her messages. Modern people are so careless on the internet. They think no one can see them, and they're being completely open. Here's a picture from last Tuesday. Sandra and Chad enter room 207 of the roadside motel. She's wearing the same red dress she supposedly bought for her yoga class. He's with a bouquet of roses and a bottle of champagne. Romantic date at a cheap motel. And here's last month's correspondence. Chad writes, "Can't wait to see you Thursday." Sandra replies, "I miss you too. Liam is going away on a business trip this weekend. Maybe we can spend time together?" They plan a trip to the mountains, to the same cabin that Chad rents for special occasions. The best part is the bank statements. Sandra regularly withdraws cash from their joint account, officially for groceries and household needs. Actually, it's for gifts for Chad, expensive shirts, watches, even gold cufflinks. She spends her husband's money on her lover and has no qualms about it. I thumbed through the files, refreshing my memory of the details. Randy had done a great job. Every photo dated, every message saved with the time it was sent. The dirt was meticulously, methodically assembled. Enough to destroy Sandra's life and expose her true colors. I opened the contacts on Liam's phone. Yeah, I knew his cell phone password. My son never hid it from me. Thought the old man had nothing to look for. Well, he shouldn't have. The phone contained the contacts of everyone I knew, including Sandra's relatives. Robert Miller, Daddy, Carol Miller, Mommy, Jessica Hunt, sister, plus a dozen family friends, colleagues, neighbors, all the people Sandra holds dear, all the people who think she's a model wife and mother. Soon they will know the truth. I created a group message and added all the contacts. The headline was simple: The Truth About Sandra. Then I started attaching files. First, the most explicit photos. Sandra and Chad kissing by the car, entering the motel, coming out 2 hours later, disheveled and happy. Then the correspondence, especially the messages where they discuss Liam. "Your husband is so naive," Chad writes. "Yeah, he doesn't suspect a thing," Sandra replies. "So what do we do next?" "Not change anything for now. I like this life. Cynical, frank, unadorned. I've enclosed bank statements too. Let everyone see what the family money's being spent on. $200 for a shirt for Chad, $300 for a watch, $500 for a weekend in the mountains, and Liam thinks his wife is a frugal hostess." The final touch was the appointment calendar, a neat little sign with dates, times, places to go. Every Tuesday and Thursday for 2 years. While Liam works, his wife has fun with her lover. Systematic, regular, no remorse. Check the message again. It's all there. Photos, correspondence, documents. There's more than enough evidence. No one can say it's a fake or a misunderstanding. Too many details, too many coincidences. I hit the send button. The message went out to all the contacts at the same time. Robert and Carol, Jessica and Tom, family, friends, neighbors, co-workers. In a few minutes, their entire company would receive a pleasant surprise. I leaned back in my chair and closed the tablet. The deed was done. Now all that's left to do is wait. Soon the house would be in an uproar. Phones will ring, people will start reading messages, looking at pictures, and then they'll realize they're sitting at the same table with a lying cheater. I wonder how Sandra will act when the truth comes out. Will she deny it? Accuse me of slander? Or will she just confess and try to justify herself? And how will Liam react when he finds out that his model wife has been leading him on for 2 years? The rain was still pounding on the garage roof. Lights were on in the house. Muffled voices could be heard. Nothing had changed yet, but pretty soon this idyll would crumble, and everyone would see each other's real faces. Liam walked back into the house and closed the front door behind him with the relief of a man who had just solved a difficult problem. He ran a hand through his hair, adjusted his tie, and headed into the living room where his company was waiting for him. He had a strange smile on his face, which he carefully maintained whenever he needed to hide his awkwardness. "Where's Keith?" Carol asked, looking around. "It's taking him so long to come back." "Dad's a little tired," Liam answered, sitting down next to his wife on the couch. He was feeling a little sick. He decided to lie down, and he wanted me to apologize to everyone. Sandra gave her husband a grateful look. She understood what had happened and was grateful that Liam had handled the problem delicately. Now the evening could continue in peace, without the risk of awkward moments or inappropriate comments from her father-in-law. "Of course," Carol nodded sympathetically. "At his age, such changes are hard to make. New home, new people, different climate. It's a serious stress on the body." Robert took a sip of wine from a crystal glass and coughed, drawing attention to himself. "I hope he's comfortable in your home," he said in the tone of a man doing a public duty. "Taking care of elderly parents is a sacred thing, especially when they're all alone." Liam nodded, agreeing with his father-in-law. He always liked it when Robert approved of what he did. The opinion of the older generation meant a lot in this family. Carol and Robert were the unquestioned authorities who were listened to and whose advice was taken into account when making important decisions. "We're trying to do the best we can," Sandra said as she carefully arranged the folds in her beige dress. Keith had been through a lot in recent years. The death of his beloved wife, the sale of his ancestral home in Detroit. He really needs time to adjust to his new life. Jessica, who had been silently listening to the conversation, looking at the family photos on the mantelpiece, suddenly turned to the company. "I think he's an interesting man," she said, sitting down in the chair opposite the sofa. "He's seen a lot of things in his life. Those stories about Detroit, the factories, impressive, frankly." Tom nodded, supporting his wife and adjusting his glasses on his nose. "I absolutely agree. He's got a lot of life experience. It's not every day you meet someone who worked in the legendary Big Three plants. It's living history of American industry." Robert frowned slightly, setting his glass down on the coffee table. He strongly disliked it when the working professions were extolled. It was his profound belief that successful people were those who rose above physical labor, who managed people and processes, not those who stood at a machine with a wrench in their hands. "Experience is experience," he said rather dryly, "but it's important to look to the future and not get stuck in the past all the time, especially at this age." "Dad's absolutely right," Liam agreed hastily, fidgeting with the cuffs of his shirt. "Eshant, Sandra and I talk about this a lot between us. A person always needs new goals, new interests, new perspectives." Carol set aside her porcelain coffee cup and looked at her daughter carefully. "Darling, how are things with Liam in general?" she asked with a motherly concern in her voice. "Work, plans, personal life. We don't see each other much lately. We don't talk much." Sandra literally blossomed from her mother's attention. She loved to talk about her life, especially when the listeners were friendly and ready to listen to every detail. In her voice immediately appeared warm, soulful notes. Her face became alive and expressive. "We're doing just fine, Mom," she said with genuine enthusiasm. "My job at the bank is going great, and I recently got a small but nice promotion. And Liam is doing very well at his logistics company, too." Liam smiled modestly but contentedly. He was always pleased to hear his wife praise him in front of his relatives and acquaintances. It once again confirmed his status of a successful, established man who could adequately provide for his family financially and socially. "And what about personal plans?" Carol continued her cautious inquiries, leaning forward slightly. "When are my father and I going to have grandchildren? We can't wait to be grandparents." Sandra tensed slightly, but masterfully hid her embarrassment behind her usual smile. The question of children was a rather sore subject for her. She and Liam had been trying to have a child for several years now, but so far without success. Doctors unanimously said that from the medical point of view, there are no serious obstacles. You just need to be patient and not to be nervous. We are not in any particular hurry, she said as diplomatically as possible. First, we want to finally get on our feet financially, to create a decent material base for future children. That's exactly the right approach, Robert nodded approvingly. Children are a huge responsibility, a huge expense, and a radical change in life. It's a step that should be taken with the utmost seriousness and deliberation. Jessica snorted quietly, covering her mouth with her hand. My God, you sound like you're starting a major corporation, she said with an ill-concealed chuckle. Not a normal human family with children and joys. Carol looked at her youngest daughter sternly, pressing her lips together. She strongly disliked such frivolous, non-serious comments about family planning. In their conservative family, starting a family and raising children were taken very seriously and responsibly. Jessica is certainly right that not everything in life can be calculated and planned in advance, Tom said softly but firmly, adjusting his tie. Sometimes life itself tells you the right time to make the right moves. Liam adjusted his shirt collar, his usual gesture in moments of nervousness. The subject of children invariably caused him deep inner anxiety and unease. He was secretly afraid that he was the main problem, that he would be physically unable to give his beloved wife the offspring she so ardently desired. We sincerely believe that everything will happen in due time, Sandra said, gently taking her husband's hand and intertwining her fingers. In the meantime, we are enjoying a quiet life together, building our careers, traveling. Robert nodded contentedly. He liked very much such a reasonable, balanced approach of his son-in-law and his favorite daughter to all vital issues. No undue haste, no rash emotional decisions. Everything is strictly according to plan. Everything is under reliable control. How have you been working at the bank lately? He asked Sandra. Banking is a very interesting and promising field, with many opportunities for professional and career growth. Sandra visibly perked up at the mention of work. Professional work was a topic she could talk about for hours on end. She genuinely loved her demanding position. She loved the daily interaction with a wide variety of clients and helping to solve their complex financial issues. The work is very satisfying, she said with genuine enthusiasm. Every working day brings new interesting people, completely different situations and challenges. Just last week, I helped a young couple get their first mortgage to buy a house. It is impossible to convey what a pleasure it is to see people's sincere joy and gratitude. And how is the work team working out? Carol asked with keen interest. Is your team friendly? Are your colleagues pleasant? On the whole, it's very good, Sandra nodded. There are some wonderful people with whom we have a particularly close relationship and friendship. We meet quite often, even after hours, to discuss current affairs and plans. Liam listened attentively to his wife's stories and nodded approvingly. He was well aware of her regular after-work meetings with colleagues. Sometimes Sandra came home quite late at night, explaining the delay with important corporate events or urgent work matters. Liam never even thought of doubting her word. Sandra had always been a very responsible, conscientious employee. Are you planning a vacation this year? Jessica asked briskly, leaning back in her chair. The summer has almost passed unnoticed, and you seem to have not gone on vacation anywhere in particular. There are plans, Liam answered, putting his arm around her shoulders. Maybe we'll go to the mountains for the weekend. It's especially beautiful there now in the fall, very quiet and peaceful, a nice break from the hustle and bustle of the city. Sandra tensed almost imperceptibly at the mention of a mountain trip. A trip to the mountains was indeed planned for the coming weekend, but emphatically not with her husband. Chad had already booked a cozy, romantic cabin on the picturesque shore of a mountain lake, and they were going to spend an unforgettable weekend there as a couple. Liam was supposed to be in Charlotte on a business trip. That's an excellent idea, Tom said, rubbing his hands together enthusiastically. Jessica and I love the mountains too. Fresh, clean air, stunning scenic views, complete silence, and peace. The conversation flowed smoothly from one topic to another. All the participants felt comfortable and at ease in this warm, homely atmosphere. Sandra occasionally jumped up from the couch to pour coffee or bring fresh snacks from the kitchen. Liam kept the conversation going by telling funny stories from work. Robert shared his opinions on the state of the local economy and the political situation in the neighborhood. Carol shared the latest banking news and gossip. Jessica entertained everyone with funny stories about her eccentric clients at the travel agency. The atmosphere was artificially festive, and everyone was careful to keep the conversation light and casual. No one wanted to disturb this idyll with inappropriate questions or awkward pauses. Keith's absence was even beneficial. Everyone felt more relaxed, without fear of sharp comments or inappropriate remarks from the older man. The first phone rang at 23 minutes past 9. The sharp sound of the melody cut through the cozy atmosphere of the living room, causing everyone to turn around. Carol fumbled for her smartphone in the small black purse that lay beside her on the couch. "Excuse me," she said, looking at the screen. "That's odd. Someone sent a text. Usually no one texts me in the evening." She swiped her finger across the screen, opening the incoming message. Her face changed instantly. The blush disappeared, her eyes widened, her mouth dropped open in amazement. Carol stared at the display as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. "Alloy, sir." "What is it, dear?" Robert asked worriedly, leaning toward his wife. "Is it bad news?" Carol silently held out the phone to him with a trembling hand. Robert took the device and looked at the screen. His face immediately petrified, his eyebrows furrowed, his lips pressed into a thin line. He silently scrolled through the images with his finger, his breathing getting heavier and heavier. "Jesus Christ," he whispered, not taking his eyes off the screen. At that moment, Jessica's cell phone rang. She cheerfully reached for her bright red purse, but when she opened the message, her face contorted with shock. "What the hell?" she exclaimed louder than she should have. "Tom, look at this right now." Tom took the phone from his wife and scrutinized the contents of the message. His usual smile slowly disappeared from his face, giving way to an expression of utter bewilderment and confusion. "Jessica, where did you get this?" he asked quietly, but there was alarm in his voice. Liam stared at his wife's relatives in bewilderment. He didn't understand what was going on, why everyone was suddenly so strange and tense. The atmosphere in the room changed dramatically in a matter of seconds. "What happened?" he asked, getting up from the sofa. "What is it?" Sandra sat next to her husband and watched what was happening. She saw her parents and sister looking at their phones, their faces changing, but she didn't yet realize the scale of the disaster. She felt a bad feeling inside, a chill running down her spine. "Sandra?" Robert's voice was low and threatening. "Come here. Now!" She slowly got up from the couch, feeling her legs go cotton. Walking over to her father on unbending legs, he handed her the phone silently. Sandra took the device and looked at the screen. The world around her spun and swam. On the display was a picture taken at the entrance to the roadside motel. She was herself, wearing the red dress she'd bought especially for her meetings with Chad. Next to her is Chad Morris with a bouquet of roses in his hands. They kiss, her hand resting on his chest, his arm around her waist. It's not what you think it is," she whispered, but her voice sounded unconvincing even to herself. "What is it then?" Robert asked coldly. "Explain it to us, daughter." Liam stepped closer, trying to see what had everyone so excited. Sandra instinctively clutched her phone to her chest, hiding the screen. "Sandra, let me see it," Liam said, holding out his hand. "No," she replied sharply. This is a misunderstanding." But Jessica had already risen from her chair and was heading toward his wife's brother with the phone in her hand. "Liam, you need to see this," she said, her voice shaking with indignation and some strange satisfaction at the same time. She held out her phone to him. Liam took the device and began to read. On the screen was a correspondence between his wife and Chad Morris. The messages were dated last week. "Can't wait to see you on Thursday," Chad wrote. "I miss you too. These 2 days are taking forever," Sandra replied. "What about your husband?" "Liam doesn't suspect a thing. He's so naive." "Good, I've booked our usual room." "Perfect. Don't forget the champagne." Liam reread the messages over and over, unable to believe his eyes. The words seemed to dance before his eyes, their meaning coming through slowly, like through thick glass. "What does it mean?" he asked, looking up at his wife. "Sandra, what is this correspondence?" "Liam, I can explain," she began, but her voice trailed off halfway through. Tom's phone rang as well. He silently opened the message and looked at the files sent to him. They were bank statements showing Sandra's spending over the past months. Expensive shirts, watches, jewelry, all purchases made on days she supposedly had yoga. "Ah, good God," Tom muttered, showing the screen to his wife. "Jessica, look at these amounts." Jessica took the phone and quickly looked through the documents. Her eyes lit up with schadenfreude. She had always envied her older sister, her successful marriage, her reputation as the perfect wife. And now that reputation was crumbling before her eyes. $300 for the watt, she read loudly. $200 for a shirt. $500 for a weekend in the mountains. Sandra, that's Liam's money. You're spending family money on your lover. Sandra lunged at her sister, trying to take the phone away. "Give it back," she screamed. "It's private. You have no right." "Private?" Jessica bounced away, holding the phone high above her head. "You call cheating on your husband a private matter?" Carol sat on the couch with her hands pressed to her chest, crying quietly. Her perfect daughter, her pride, her role model, had turned out to be a common cheater. All these years she had bragged to her friends about Sandra's successful marriage, and now it turned out it was all a lie. "How could you?" she sobbed. "How could you do this to Liam? To us? To the family?" Robert stood up from his chair, his face darker than a cloud. He'd spent his whole life proud of his reputation, his good name in town, and now his daughter had dishonored the whole family. Tomorrow, everyone who received these messages will be talking about it. Sandra Elizabeth, he said her full name, as he had done as a child when she had been seriously wronged. "Explain to me immediately what's going on here." Liam was still holding Jessica's phone in his hands, rereading the correspondence. At some point, it dawned on him that those messages were real. The dates matched the days Sandra supposedly went to yoga. The time they were sent was just as she was coming home from her workouts. 2 years, he whispered. The correspondence mentions that this has been going on for 2 years. "Liam, please listen to me." Sandra tried to approach her husband, but he recoiled. "Stay away from me," he said quietly. But there was such pain in his voice that everyone in the room fell silent. The phones kept ringing. Robert's, Carol's, Jessica's, Tom's. Each time new files came in. Photos, messages, documents. Someone had been very carefully gathering dirt on Sandra and was now sending it to everyone the family knew. "Who is doing this?" Tom wondered, looking at the next message. "Who would have access to all this data?" "It doesn't matter who," Robert said sharply. "What matters is that it's all true. I can see in my daughter's face that it's true." Sandra was rushing around the room trying to take everyone's phones away, but there were too many of them, and the messages kept coming. She realized that her secret life was completely exposed, that there was nothing more to hide. "Liam," she turned to her husband with desperation in her voice. "I never meant to hurt you. It just happened. I didn't plan it." 2 years, Sandra," Liam interrupted her. "Aunt, you lied to my eyes for 2 years. Every day, every night. You kissed me with the same lips you kissed him with." His voice trailed off, and he turned away from the window, unable to look at his wife anymore. It was raining outside the window, the drops dripping down the glass like tears down his cheek. Jessica leafed through the new messages with undisguised interest. There was one particularly compromising photo of Sandra and Chad leaving their motel room, both disheveled and happy, holding hands. The date on the photo was last Thursday, the same day Sandra had yoga. "And here's a particularly interesting one," she announced, showing the photo to everyone present. "Last Thursday, 3:30 in the afternoon. Sandra, didn't you say you were at yoga until 4? Sandra sank down on the couch, covering her face with her hands. She could no longer deny the obvious. The evidence was too much, too detailed and too precise. "Yes," she said quietly. "Yes, it's true. I'm seeing Chad." There was a heavy silence. Even Jessica fell silent, stunned by her sister's frank confession. Carol sobbed more quietly. Robert stood as still as a statue. "Why? Aswakshan?" Liam asked, not turning away from the window. "Why did you do that?" Sandra lifted her head, looking at her husband's back. "I don't know," she whispered. "I was bored. Lonely. You're always at work. We hardly ever talk." "Is it my fault?" Liam turned around sharply. "You've been cheating on me for 2 years, spending our money on a lover, and it's my fault?" The phones kept ringing and ringing. Each new signal was like a whiplash. Sandra realized that by morning the whole town would know about her cheating, her reputation, her career, her life, all ruined in one evening. Robert rose slowly from his chair, his movements heavy and determined. His face had turned a crimson hue, the veins on his temples bulging with anger. He walked over to his daughter, who was still sitting on the couch with her head down, and stood to his full height in front of her. Shakun, Sandra Elizabeth Miller, he said slowly and clearly, as if each word hurt him physically. You have dishonored our family. You've trampled on the good name we've spent decades building. His voice shook with restrained rage. Robert had been proud of his reputation in Kannapolis all his life. He was a respected auto repair shop owner, an honest businessman, a model family man. His family was held up as an example to others, and now his daughter had turned it all into a laughingstock. "Daddy, please," Sandra began, but he interrupted her abruptly. "Shut up!" he shouted so loudly that everyone flinched. "You forfeited your right to an explanation. 2 years. 2 years you've been leading not only your husband around, but all of us." Carol sat on the couch, holding a handkerchief wet with tears to her face. Her shoulders shook with sobs. A woman who had spent a lifetime watching her appearance and behavior now looked broken and aged 10 years in one evening. "How could you do this?" she sobbed through her tears. "I raised you to be a decent girl. I taught you family values. And you... She couldn't finish. A new wave of sobs came over her head. Carol imagined how tomorrow at work at the bank, everyone would look at her with a special look. How the neighbors would murmur behind her back. How her friends would shake their heads sympathetically, secretly gloating. Jessica stood by the fireplace with the phone in her hand, her eyes burning with unconcealed triumph. All her life she had envied her older sister, her beauty, her successful marriage, her reputation as a model wife. Her parents had always held Sandra up as an example, comparing Jessica to her, not in Jessica's favor. "You know what, Sandra," she said with a venomous smile, "I always felt there was something wrong with you. You were too perfect, too right, and now the truth is out." "Jessica!" Carol shouted sternly at her. "This is not the time for this kind of talk." "When is it?" Jessica objected, clearly enjoying the situation. "When else can we tell the truth about our dear model sister?" Liam was still standing at the window with his back to the room. His shoulders were tense, his hands clenched into fists. He was silent, but everyone could see how hard it was for him to keep silent. Every now and then he flinched as if he'd been struck. "Liam," Sandra called to him gently, "please turn around. Look at me." He turned around slowly. His face was pale, his eyes red from holding back tears. When he looked at his wife, his gaze was filled with pain, disappointment, and something else. Total incomprehension. "Why?" he asked quietly. "Just tell me why. What were you missing?" Sandra raised her head, met his gaze. There was confusion in her eyes, fear, but not remorse. "Yeah, I was bored," she began uncertainly. "You're always at work. We hardly talk. We don't spend time together." "Bored?" Liam interjected, a metallic note in his voice. "You were bored, so you decided to fuck Chad Morris in a cheap motel?" Carol aghast at the crudeness of her son-in-law's words, but no one paid attention. Robert only clenched his jaw tighter, and Jessica smirked openly. "Liam, don't say that," Sandra asked. "What do you mean?" He took a step toward her. "What do you call what you've been doing for 2 years? Yoga? Extra classes at the gym?" Tom, who had been silent in the corner until then, coughed awkwardly and moved closer to his wife. "Jessica, maybe we should leave," he suggested quietly. "Leave them to sort themselves out as a family." "No way," Jessica cut him off, not taking her eyes off the unfolding drama. "Sion, I've listened to Sandra's wonderful wife for years. Now I want to hear her justify herself." Robert walked over to the couch where his weeping wife sat and put his hand on her shoulder. "Carol, get your things together. We're leaving." "Dad, wait!" Sandra jumped up from the couch. "Don't leave like that. Let's talk calmly. We'll talk about everything." "What's there to talk about?" Robert shouted. "About how you spent your husband's money on your lover? How you lied to our faces? How you turned our family dinners into a farce?" He headed toward the hallway, Carol rising to follow him. The woman walked unsteadily, as if her legs were unsteady. At the coat rack, she stopped and turned to her daughter. "Sandra," she said in a broken voice, I don't know what we did wrong, where we went wrong in your upbringing. Mom, it's not your fault. Sandra rushed toward her mother, but Carol recoiled. Don't come near me, she said firmly. Not now. I need time to process all this. Robert was putting on his coat, his movements sharp, angry. He tossed the scarf over his shoulder and turned to his son-in-law. Liam, I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry. You're a good man. You deserved better. Liam nodded, unable to utter a word. Robert opened the door, the cold evening air rushing into the hallway. Carol walked past her daughter without even looking at her. Mom, please, Sandra pleaded. Don't leave me like this. The door slammed shut with a sound that shook the window panes. Sandra remained standing in the hallway looking at the closed door. Jessica watched the scene with undisguised pleasure. Sure. Well, dear sister, she said wryly, have you finally shown your true colors to your parents? Shut up, Sandra snapped, turning to her sister. You've always hated me. Hated you, Jessica laughed. No, darling. I just knew that sooner or later your mask would come off. And here it was, waiting. Tom yanked his wife by the arm. Jessica, that's enough. We should go too. Yes, we should, she agreed, pulling her cell phone out of her purse. But I have to do something first. What? Tom asked apprehensively. Send these photos to Mary Jenkins. She works in the same office as Chad. Let her know who she's dealing with. Jessica, no! Sandra exclaimed. Don't do this! Why not? Jessica shrugged, pressing buttons on her phone. People have a right to know the truth about your boyfriend, especially his wife. Sandra lunged at her sister, trying to grab the phone, but Jessica dodged her hand. Too late, she announced triumphantly. Sent. I think there will be something to talk about in town tomorrow. Liam had been watching in silence the whole time. When Jessica sent the message, he slowly approached her. Why did you do that? He asked tiredly. Wasn't it fair? She replied. Chad is married too. His wife has a right to know what kind of husband she has. Tom took his wife's hand and pulled her toward the exit. Come on, honey. There's nothing more to do here. Jessica reluctantly followed but stopped at the door and turned to her sister. You know what, Sandra, she said with a cold chuckle. All my life my parents have told me, be like Sandra. Learn from Sandra. Sandra is a role model. And now I can say to them, no thanks, I'd rather be me. Jessica, Sandra began, but her sister was already out. Tom followed his wife, casting her an apologetic glance in farewell. The door slammed shut again, leaving an oppressive silence in the house. Sandra stood in the hallway, wrapping her arms around herself. Liam walked past her into the living room without looking in her direction. He sank into a chair and covered his face with his hands. Liam, his wife called softly, entering the room. Don't come near me, he said without lifting his head. Not now. I have something I need to explain to you. What is it? He raised his head and looked at her. That you love him? That our marriage was a mistake? That I'm a bad husband? No, that's not true. Then what is it? He got up from his chair. Tell me something that would help me understand why my wife has been seeing another man for 2 years. Sandra opened her mouth to reply, but the words wouldn't come. She realized that any explanation would sound pathetic and unconvincing. There were no words that could justify what she was doing. I didn't plan for this to happen, she finally said. It just happened. Happened? Liam interjected. 2 years isn't an accident, Sandra. It's a choice. Your choice. He headed toward the stairs leading to the second floor. Where are you going? She asked. To pack, he answered without turning around. I can't be in the same house with you anymore. Liam, wait! She ran after him. We can talk this through, find a solution. He stopped on the first step and turned to her. What solution, Sandra? Do you want me to forgive you for 2 years of lying? You want me to pretend it never happened? I'm ready to break up with Chad, she exclaimed desperately. I'll never see him again. Liam laughed bitterly. What if this scandal hadn't happened today? If no one had found out, would you have confessed to me yourself? Sandra was silent. They both knew the answer to that question. Exactly, Liam said and walked up the stairs. The house was silent, broken only by the sound of rain outside the windows and the muffled sound of footsteps on the second floor. Sandra sat on the sofa in the empty living room and for the first time all evening allowed herself to cry. The rain pounded on the garage roof monotonously and soothingly. I sat in an old chair with shabby upholstery and waited. The tablet lay on the workbench. The screen dimmed long ago. The deed was done, the files had been sent, and now all that was left was to watch the consequences. From time to time, muffled voices came from the house, but it was impossible to make out the words. At 10:15, the voices grew louder. Then I heard the front door slam once, then again. So the guests were starting to leave. I wondered how quickly it had all fallen apart. Had Liam planned for the evening to end this way when he'd locked me in here an hour ago? I rose from my chair and walked over to the small window in the ceiling. From here I could see the lighted windows of the house, the silhouettes of the people inside. Some walked back and forth across the living room. Others stood motionless. The family idol had cracked, and now everyone was reaping the benefits. About 10 minutes after the second slamming of the door, I heard quick footsteps on the driveway. Someone was running toward the garage, ignoring the rain. The steps were uneven, hurried. The key turned in the lock with such force that it creaked. The door swung open, and Liam burst into the garage. He was wet, disheveled, breathing hard like he'd run a marathon. His shirt stuck to his body, his hair tangled. There was panic on his face, his eyes darting from side to side. "Dad!" he exclaimed when he saw me at the window. "Thank God you're here." "Where else would I be?" I answered calmly. "You locked me in." Liam ignored my tone. He ran up to me, grabbing me by the shoulders, his hands shaking. "Dad, there's been a disaster," he blurted out. "It's a nightmare. Everyone knows about Sandra." "Know what exactly?" I asked nonchalantly. Her affair with Chad Morris." Liam could barely pronounce the name of his wife's lover. "Someone sent photos, correspondence, documents, to everyone. Robert, Carol, Jessica." He thrashed around the garage, clutching his head. His face was contorted with horror and disbelief. His son really didn't know his wife was cheating on him. Naive beyond belief. "And then what happened?" I asked, taking a pack of cigarettes out of my pocket. "They left. They're all gone." Liam stopped in front of me. Robert was yelling at Sandra. Carol was crying. Jessica, she was even cheering. Can you believe it? I lit a cigarette, took a drag. So she was happy. Of course, the little sister finally got a chance to take it out on the big sister. I've waited my whole life for a moment like this. "What about Sandra?" I asked. "Did she confess?" "Yes." Liam clenched his fists. "She didn't admit it at first, but then she did. She said she'd been seeing him for 2 years. 2 years, Dad? How could she?" Tears rolled down his cheeks. A grown man crying like a child whose favorite toy had been broken. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "What are you going to do now?" I asked. "I don't know." He clutched his head. "I don't know. Everything fell apart in one night. My family, my reputation, everything." "Family," I grinned. "What kind of family was it if your wife cheated on you for 2 years?" Liam looked at me in surprise. I guess he hadn't expected such a reaction from his father. He thought I was going to comfort him, pity him, tell him everything would work out. "Dad, you don't understand," he began. "This is a disaster. Tomorrow the whole town will know about this. It's going to affect my career too." "Your career?" I questioned him. "Shouldn't it affect your wife?" "Her too, of course, but you're more worried about what people will say," I finished for him. Liam stopped talking. He realized I was right. He was more concerned about his own reputation than betraying his wife. Typical. "Dad, who could have done it?" he suddenly asked. "I don't know. Who would have access to all this material? Photographs, correspondence, bank records." I took a drag on my cigarette, looking at my son. He stood in front of me, wet, disheveled, eyes reddened with tears. And slowly, very slowly, he began to understand. "You'd have to be a hacker," he continued, "or have access to other people's accounts." His gaze fell to the workbench where the tablet lay. Then he looked at me. There was a glimmer of understanding in his eyes. "Dad?" he said uncertainly. "Isn't that you?" I silently put out my cigarette on the iron can. I didn't need an answer. Liam had figured it out. "Oh my God," he whispered. "It was you. You set this whole thing up. Did you think the old man just agreed to sit in the garage?" I asked calmly. Liam jerked back as if I'd hit him. His face turned white as chalk. "How could you do that?" he exhaled. How could you destroy my family? Me? I laughed. Son, I didn't destroy anything. I just showed everyone the truth. Your family was destroyed by Sandra 2 years ago when she decided to fuck Chad Morris. But why? Liam grabbed me by the sleeve of my jacket. Why did you do it? Why did you lock me in the garage? I answered a question with a question. So I wouldn't embarrass you in front of decent people? He let go of my hand, stepped back a step. He finally realized that he himself gave me a reason for revenge. Dad, it's mean, he said in a shaky voice. Mean? I said it again. What's mean about the truth? You wanted me to keep quiet while your wife made a cuckold out of you? You could have told me in person, Liam exclaimed. In private, instead of publicly shaming me. I could have, I agreed. But would you have believed me? Liam was silent. We both knew the answer. He wouldn't. He would have defended his wife, accused me of lying, maybe even thrown me out of the house. Blind love makes people stupid. Besides, I added, you're not the only one who has a right to know the truth. Sandra's parents do too, and Chad's wife, and everyone else they lied to. Liam sank into a chair by the workbench. He looked crushed, broken. His world had crumbled in one evening, and now he had to pick up the pieces. What do I do now? He asked quietly. It's up to you, I answered. You're a grown man. Are you? He looked up at me. Are you happy with what you did? I thought for a few seconds. Am I happy? Sandra got what she deserved. Liam had finally learned the truth. The ostensible family idol had crumbled, exposing the rotten side. Yes, I said honestly, I'm happy. Liam flinched like he'd been slapped. He hadn't expected such candor from his father. Trutum, you hate me, he said affirmatively, not questioningly. I didn't hate him, I shook my head. But I don't respect you either. You're embarrassed of me, Liam. You're embarrassed of the man who gave you life, raised you, put you on your feet. Dad, today you locked me in the garage like a naughty dog, I continued, so I wouldn't ruin your evening in front of your father-in-law. Turns out there was nothing to ruin. Your family was already rotten from the inside out. Liam was silent, his head down. There was nothing to say. You know what the saddest part was? I asked. You care more about what people think than you do about your wife cheating on you. Your reputation is more important to you than the truth. That's not true, he objected weakly. Yes, I said firmly. You were afraid I'd say the wrong thing all night. And there was something to say. Not to me, but to your precious Sandra. From inside the house came the sounds of an argument. Sandra was screaming, her voice breaking into high notes. Then the door slammed. The car started, engine roaring, drove off. Liam flinched at every sound. Was that Sandra driving away? He asked. Looks like it, I answered. Probably to her sisters. Or Chad. Though I doubt Chad would accept her after a scandal like that. Dad, stop it, Liam asked tiredly. That's enough. I shrugged. Really, that was enough. Mission accomplished, goal achieved. The ostensible family idol had crumbled, and everyone had seen the truth. Now everyone will reap what they sow. Let's go inside, I said, heading for the door. You're soaking wet. Liam got up and followed. We walked out of the garage into the rain. The drops hit my face, cold and sharp. The house was lit up but seemed empty. No one was visible in the living room windows. Where's Sandra? Liam asked, stopping on the porch. I told you she left, I said, pulling out my keys. Does she have keys to the house? She does, but I don't think she'll be back tonight. We went inside. The living room was a mess. Overturned glasses, napkins on the floor, uneaten food on plates, traces of a family holiday party that had turned into a disaster. Liam walked through to the living room and sank into a chair. He looked at the mayhem around him, but didn't seem to see it. His thoughts were far away. What's going to happen now? He asked, speaking more to himself than to me. It will be what it will be, I answered philosophically. Life goes on, son, even after such shocks. And how will I show up at work tomorrow? He looked at me. Everyone will know. Jessica will probably tell everyone. So, I asked, are you ashamed that your wife cheated on you? It's her shame, not yours. but people will be watching, whispering. Let them watch, I shrugged, and then they'll find a new topic for gossip. They always do. Liam covered his face with his hands. His shoulders were shaking. He was crying, I guess. I felt sorry for him, but not really. It was his own fault for what had happened. If he hadn't been embarrassed of his dad, if he hadn't locked me in the garage, things might have gone differently. No, it wouldn't. It still wouldn't have. Sandra would still be a cheater, and Liam would still be a cuckold. I was just speeding up the process of exposure. Dad, Liam said without raising his head, you do realize that it's over between us now, right? What's over? I clarified. We can't live in the same house after this. We can't. I nodded. I'd expected that to happen. I understand, I said calmly. What do you suggest? I don't know yet. I need time to think it over. You have time, I agreed, and I have money. Liam raised his head, looked at me. What money? From the sale of the house in Detroit? 200,000. Enough for a place of my own. His eyes widened in surprise. You didn't say. Why would I? I grinned. You thought the old man was destitute and dependent. Let him think that. Liam was silent, digesting this information. So his father wasn't as helpless as he seemed. Not such a burden on the family. I'll start looking for an apartment tomorrow, I said, rising from my chair. In the meantime, I'm going to bed. It had been a long day. I headed for the stairs, but I stopped at the first step and turned to my son. By the way, Liam, I said, tonight you told me to sit here and just try to ruin the evening. I didn't ruin the evening. I made it better. Now you know the truth. With those words, I went up to my room. Liam was left sitting in a chair amidst the wreckage of his perfect family. Tomorrow he was going to start a new life, a life without illusions. The week passed in tense silence. Liam and I barely spoke, only meeting in the kitchen in the mornings for coffee. He looked 10 years older. Dark circles under his eyes, unshaven cheeks, slumped shoulders. He didn't sleep well. I could hear him tossing and turning at night, the floorboards creaking as he paced the bedroom. Sandra didn't come back the first night. She didn't come back the second night either. On the third day, Liam got a message from her, a short, dry one. She was staying with her sister and asked him not to call. Need time to think. What cynical hypocrisy. For 2 years, she'd been thinking between Chad Morris's legs, and now she needed time to think. Thursday morning, Liam left for work earlier than usual. Apparently, he didn't want to meet me in the kitchen. He knew it was inevitable, but he kept putting it off. And then he came home late that night when I'd already gone to bed. Coward. He's been a coward all his life, and he's still a coward. Friday night, he couldn't take it anymore. He came into my room when I was packing my suitcase. He stood in the doorway, shuffling awkwardly from foot to foot. He had the expression of a man who wanted to say something but didn't know how to start. Are you going? He asked at last. I was, I confirmed, folding my shirts. Where to? An apartment on Main Street, I said briefly. 1 bedroom, first floor. There's a drugstore and a grocery store nearby. Liam nodded. He was quiet for a moment, then sat on the edge of the bed. Dad, maybe we're being a little hasty, he started cautiously. Maybe we should think about it some more. I stopped, holding my folded pants in my hands, and looked at my son. A week of thinking was clearly not good for him. He looked lost, confused. Loneliness frightened him more than the presence of an unwanted father. What to think about? I asked. You said yourself that we couldn't live in the same house. I was upset at the time, he excused himself. I was speaking out of emotion. And now what? The emotion's gone? Liam lowered his head, didn't answer. We both knew that emotion had nothing to do with it. There was a chasm between us that couldn't be bridged. He would never forgive me for destroying his ostensible well-being. And I won't forgive him for locking me in the garage like a tired dog. How's Sandra? I asked as I continued packing. Still brooding at her sisters? She filed for divorce, Liam said quietly. I wasn't surprised. I'd expected it to happen. There was no point in pretending anymore when the cards were out in the open. What's she asking for? Half the house, half the savings, alimony while she looks for a job. Generous girl, I grinned. And she lost her job? She was asked to quit. After that scandal. Liam clenched his fists. The whole town knows. People pointing fingers in the street, whispering behind her back. It's hard, I agreed without much sympathy. Dad, Liam looked up at me, eyes full of pain. You do realize you ruined my life, right? I stopped, straightened up, and looked at my son carefully. He was sitting on my bed, hunched over, blaming me for ruining his life, one that his own wife had ruined 2 years ago. Ruined? I interjected. Interesting point of view. What else would you call it? He stood up, pacing the room. I had a family, stability, a reputation. It all fell apart in one night. You had the illusion of a family, I corrected him. There was no family. Your wife cheated on you, lied to your face, spent your money on a lover. But I didn't know, Liam exclaimed. I was happy in that ignorance. There it was. Finally, the truth came out. He felt good in ignorance. He preferred living a beautiful lie to facing the truth, an ostrich hiding its head in the sand. I see, I said, closing my suitcase. So it's my fault for opening your eyes. Yes, Liam stopped in front of me. You could have kept your mouth shut. You could have pretended like you didn't know. I could have, I agreed. And you could have not locked me in the garage. You didn't have to embarrass your father in front of your decent father-in-law and mother-in-law. Liam stopped talking. He remembered what he'd said. Sit here and don't try to ruin the evening. He blushed, turned back to the window. It was thoughtless, he muttered. I didn't mean to hurt you. But you did, I said, and I got what I deserved. What he deserved? He turned to me sharply. Do you think I deserved to be humiliated like this? I think you deserved the truth, I said calmly. And it wasn't me who humiliated you. It was your wife. Liam sank back onto the bed, covering his face with his hands. His shoulders were shaking. A 40-year-old man crying like a hurt child. It was pathetic. What am I supposed to do now? He asked through his fingers. How do I go on living? The way all divorced men live, I answered. Work, pay alimony, look for a new wife, if you're lucky. And if you're not lucky, you live alone. That's not bad either. I took my suitcase, put it by the door. I'm done packing, it's time to leave. A new apartment awaits, a new life begins. At 72, I'm a free man again. Dad, Liam called out to me as I headed for the door. Are we going to see each other again? I stopped without turning around. Kannapolis is a small town, I said. We'll probably cross paths at the store or on the street. That's not what I mean, he said quietly. I'm talking about whether we'll communicate, like father and son. That's a good question, like father and son. After everything that's happened between us, after he locked me in the garage, after I ruined his ostensible happiness. I don't know, I answered honestly. We'll see. Dad, but you're my dad, he sounded desperate. The only family I have left. Family. There's that word again. He lost one family and now he's clinging to another. He's afraid of being all alone. I see. But it's too late. Some words can't be taken back. Some actions can't be undone. When you locked me in the garage, I said, still not turning around, did you think about me being your father? Liam didn't answer, because the answer was obvious. I hadn't. At that moment, I was just a nuisance to him, an inconvenience to be put away. Neither am I thinking right now, I added, and left the room. I went downstairs and put my suitcase in the hallway. Liam didn't follow me. He stayed upstairs. Maybe he was crying. Maybe he was just sitting there staring out the window. I didn't care. I pulled out my cell phone, called a cab. The driver said he'd be there in 10 minutes. I sat down in a chair in the living room and waited. I could still smell the odor of that ill-fated dinner a week ago. The aroma of roast meat, red wine, family prosperity. It was all in the past now. There were family photos on the coffee table. Liam and Sandra at their wedding, young, beautiful, happy. He in a black suit, she in a white dress. Sincere smiles, loving looks. Who would have thought then that in a few years all this would turn out to be a lie and betrayal? Another picture is of the three of us at Sandra's birthday party last year. I'm in the center, flanked by the newlyweds, all smiling for the camera. The perfect three-generation family. A sham, as it turns out. A fake picture for social media. I took this picture, took a good look at it. It makes me look content, even happy. I didn't know about my sister-in-law's meanness back then. I believed in the strength of the family bond. Naive old man. A cab stopped outside the window. The driver honked, letting me know of his arrival. I got up, took my suitcase, headed for the door. I stopped on the threshold, turned around. Liam was standing on the stairs holding on to the railing. His face was crying, his hair disheveled. He looked at me with the expression of a lost child. "Dad," he said quietly, "what if I apologize to you? For that night, for the garage, for everything?" I looked at my son, weighing his words. Forgiveness. It's a beautiful word. But what would it change? Will it restore our trust? Will it erase the hurt? Edu, forgiveness isn't enough, I finally said. You need respect. And you don't respect me, Liam. You're embarrassed. You think I'm an inappropriate element. That's not true, he said weakly. Yes, I said firmly. And that's why it's better for us to live separately. The driver honked again, impatiently. I opened the door, stepped onto the porch. The cold air hit my face, reminding me that a new life was beginning. "Dad!" Liam called out to me. I didn't turn around. I walked to the cab, sat in the back seat, gave the driver my address. The car started and I didn't look out the back window. I didn't want to see my son standing on the porch watching me. "How far are we going?" The driver, an older man with a gray beard, asked. "Main Street," I answered. "Number 247. "Oh, I know that house. Nice place. Quiet. Are you moving there?" "I am. Family okay with that?" I chuckled. "Family? I don't have a family anymore. There's a son who's embarrassed of me and a cheating daughter-in-law who filed for divorce. It's a beautiful family." "Family is fine with me," I replied. The driver nodded and focused on the road. We drove through downtown Kannapolis, past familiar places, the bank where Sandra worked, the motel on Highway 12 where she'd met Chad, Robert's auto shop. A small town where everyone knew each other and everyone had heard of each other. Now everyone's heard of me too. The old man who exposed his cheating sister-in-law. Some disapprove, some approve, some don't care, but everyone knows. You can't hide anything in a small town. "And how far is it from your old home?" the driver asked. "Far enough," I answered, looking out the window. And it was true. The distance wasn't measured in kilometers, but in resentments, disappointments, lost illusions. There was a chasm between me and Liam that would never be crossed. He'll be left alone in his house, dealing with the aftermath of the scandal, paying alimony to his ex-wife, building a new life. And I will start my life anew in peace and quiet, without pretenses and lies. The cab pulled up in front of a low brick house, my new home. First floor, 2 rooms, a small kitchen, everything I needed. No luxury, but no showiness. Honest housing for an honest man. I paid the driver, took my suitcase, went to the front door. The keys were under the mat, as agreed with the landlady. I opened the lock, went inside. The empty room smelled of fresh paint and new wallpaper, a clean slate for a new chapter of life. I put the suitcase on the floor and looked around. Tomorrow the furniture will be delivered. The day after tomorrow the internet will be connected. In a week I'll be fully settled in. In the meantime, I could just sit in silence and think about what was and what will be. My cell phone vibrated in my pocket. A message. I pulled out the handset, looking at the screen. From Liam. "Dad, I'll miss you." I erased the message without answering. He won't miss me for long. He'd find a new wife, maybe even a better one. The main thing is not to repeat his mistakes, not to close his eyes to the truth. And I'll live my life. Without pretense, without shyness, without having to justify my past. At 72, I was finally a free man, and I liked it.